An interesting week for the euro and US dollar strength. Joining me to discuss all this and more is Bob Mason from FX Empire. Hello Bob, and thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to speak with you. Let's jump straight in. The euro steadied this week after a tough start. What do you expect to see from the ECB moving forward? Are we likely to see a rate hike anytime soon?
Well, I think earlier in the month, the chances of the rate hike could fall into record lows, according to the futures markets. And probability of a move before the end of next year was below 50%. So, as things stand, it's looking a bit dicey from that perspective. I think euro strength, continues to be the bugbear for the ECB. And we've sort of seen Draghi hold back on trying to talk down the euro in his recent speeches, but I think that's really more in contemplation of the fact that they're going to be looking at the tapering to the bond purchasing program. I think the reality is that there's been such little talk or speculation on any tweaking to the deposit or interest rates that I would say that the euro would be particularly sensitive to any sort of discussion. And obviously, as we know, there's quite a lot of concern over euro strength across members of the ECB. So for now, I would say that, next week's ECB minutes will be out, and I think there'll probably be more discussion on the tapering, but I don't think there'll be any talk of adjusting the deposit rates and interest rates. The economy's been pretty good, and apart from some soft data this morning, sort of retail sales figures out of Germany and France, which were a bit disappointing. Private sector PMI numbers have been pretty solid again. So it's going to be a bit of a balance for the ECB. The euro strength is a bit of an issue when it comes to inflation. Obviously, the lack of inflationary pressures is what's holding the ECB back. But I think they ultimately acknowledge that the economy's improved and there does need to be some easing off the sort of accommodative measures. Another interesting fact is obviously the fact that we heard from Yellen at the beginning of the week, and she was particularly hawkish. Interesting considering the fact that some of the FOMC members are not really in her camp, but some dollar strength has definitely helped the euro ease off, and obviously the German elections last week over the weekend helped as well. So I think that paves the way for the ECB to begin sort of drip feeding the markets with a tapering discussion, but definitely not any talks of interest rate hikes anytime soon, I think.
Okay, you mentioned Janet Yellen there. Let's move over to the US. The US dollar strengthened this week as prospects of a rate hike increased, and President Trump hinted at slashing taxes. Overall, what do you expect to see from the US dollar going forward?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the dollar's had a good week. It's still down more than 8% year to date, and I think while Yellen was forewarning the markets that perhaps they'd underpriced the dollar, looking at other FOMC members talking through the week, it's not particularly hawkish. Obviously, we've got the Kashkaris of the world that are never going to talk it up, but the general sense is that until the ducks are aligned, there's no way that Yellen's going to be able to rally the troops. Inflationary pressures remain pretty tepid, and we've got the PC price index figures out later today, but based on forecasts, I mean they're not nudging towards the sort of 2% objective that the Fed has. And then there's obviously the bounce in the dollar off Trump as well, and tax reforms. Now we've not had the healthcare bill pass through. I think as we've seen towards the end of this week, there's been some sort of debate over whether the administration will be able to pass through tax reforms, how successful they will be, and once it actually does roll out, what it will actually entail and what it will have. So I think some of the dollar gains might ease back just because of lingering doubts over the ability of the administration. And once you see doubts lingering over tax reforms, then the markets will then ease back on their expectations that the Fed would have to take a more aggressive projection on monetary policy, I think. So I think some pullback on the dollar, nothing significant. I think the markets will want to wait and see, what else the administration has and how they progress on discussions. But I don't think we're going to see any significant rally further in the dollar over the next few days or week at least, I'd say, until there's more clarity.
And just finally to finish up, overall, who've been the biggest winners in your opinion this week?
Well, I think it's been a week for the dollar. I think a lot of the majors have been under pressure throughout the week. And it's interesting actually, because we've heard from a lot of central bankers, and they've been under pressure to pull back from any sort of hawkish commentary off the back of dollar weakness. So the fact that the dollar has had a good week, you might actually see some of the central banks begin to shift their sort of stance again and become a little bit more aggressive. We've heard the RBA governor Lowy talk up the economy and the prospects of interest rates. So with the Aussie dollar softening a little bit, the euro softening a little bit, I think it does open the door for the central banks to begin, considering a shift in policy. But at the moment it's dollar. And I think really, as I mentioned before, it really boils down to whether Trump can deliver, and if he can deliver, then that sustainability and dollar strength will be there, and that opens the door for central banks to then move on off the back of a more aggressive rate path for the dollar. So dollar for now, but I do expect some negative sentiment, and there's a lot of stats coming out this week and next week. Next week is non-farm and wage growth and stuff, so things can change quite quickly. It's quite dynamic. So dollar this week, but I wouldn't suggest that the dollar rally is going to be sustainable for now.
Bob, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
No problem. Speak soon.
And thank you for watching. And remember, if you like this interview and would like to find out more, be sure to head over to dukascopy.tv.